we trust can be Commander Zixthor had conquered 17 star systems. His species, the Vorthak Empire, had never encountered a world they couldn't subjugate within cycles. Their massive fleet could turn planets to ash, their technology could bend space itself, and their warriors were bred for dominance across the galaxy. But as his ship scanners locked onto the third planet of this unremarkable yellow star system, something made his 3 hearts skip a beat. The readings were impossible. This blue-green world shouldn't exist. The atmospheric composition, the gravitational anomalies, the electromagnetic signatures, they matched only one planet in all the galactic databases: Earth, the legendary Death World that every spacefaring civilization whispered about in terror. The planet where evolution had gone completely insane, where creatures evolved not for survival, but for pure, relentless violence, where the dominant species, humans, were said to be so dangerous that they turned their own atmospheric conditions into weapons. But Earth was supposed to be a myth, a cautionary tale told to young alien cadets to keep them humble. No one had ever actually found it. Zixthor's claws trembled as he stared at the data streaming across his screens. If this really was Earth, if humans really existed, then his mighty fleet of conquest ships had just stumbled into the domain of the galaxy's most feared predators. And the humans had no idea they were feared. Yet. The commander's mandibles clicked nervously as he realized the horrible truth. His species was about to discover why every advanced civilization in the galaxy had one universal rule: avoid the Sol system at all costs. Unfortunately for the Vorthak Empire, they were about to learn this lesson the hard way. What happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object? The universe was about to find out, and Commander Zixthor had a sinking feeling that his unstoppable fleet was about to become very, very stoppable. The bridge of the Vorthak dreadnought Infinite Conquest hummed with nervous energy as Commander Zixthor studied the tactical displays surrounding his command throne. His fleet of 300 warships hung in the cold vacuum beyond the asteroid belt of this supposedly primitive star system, their weapons powered down but ready to activate at a moment's notice. What should have been a routine subjugation mission had turned into something far more complicated. Science Officer Kreltana approached the command platform, her usually steady hands visibly shaking as she carried a datapad. Her species, the intellectual Mordun, prided themselves on logical thinking and emotional control, but today her composure was cracking like ice. "Commander, we've completed our detailed scans of the third planet," she announced, her voice barely above a whisper. "The results are disturbing." Zixthor's 6 eyes focused on her with predatory intensity. "Explain." Kreltana's throat sac inflated with anxiety as she consulted her readings. "Sir, the planet matches every single parameter in the classified archives for Earth. Nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere with trace gases that would be toxic to most known species. Gravity that's 3 times stronger than standard civilized worlds. Massive temperature variations that would kill most life forms within hours. And the electromagnetic field," she paused, her hands trembling more violently. "It's so intense that our navigation systems are already experiencing interference, and we're still millions of kilometers away." The commander's massive frame shifted in his throne, causing the entire platform to creak under his weight. Like all Vorthak warriors, Zixthor stood nearly 3 meters tall when fully extended, his 4 powerful arms ending in claws that could rend metal. His species had evolved on a high-gravity world where only the strongest survived, but even he felt a chill of fear at the implications of Kreltana's report. "Continue!" he growled, though every instinct told him he didn't want to hear the rest. "The biodiversity readings are off all our charts, Commander. We're detecting millions of species, many of them apex predators that shouldn't be able to coexist on the same world. The oceans contain creatures larger than our escort ships. The land masses are populated by pack hunters that work in coordination patterns more complex than our military formations. And the plant life," she swallowed hard, Some of the vegetation appears to be actively carnivorous, with root systems that span entire continents. Communications Officer Bill Max, a thin, nervous member of the skittering vulture species, suddenly perked up from his station. His compound eyes were wide with terror as he processed incoming data through his cybernetic implants. "Commander, I'm picking up electromagnetic transmissions from the planet's surface. Millions of them, all on different frequencies, broadcasting constantly across the entire spectrum." Zix Thor felt his blood temperature drop several degrees. "A unified planetary defense network?" "No, sir," Bill Max replied, his voice cracking. "It appears to be entertainment. Music, moving pictures, conversations between individuals. The transmissions show a technological civilization that's completely unaware of our presence. They're not even trying to hide their communications. It's as if they have no concept of operational security." The bridge fell silent except for the low hum of the ship's systems. Every member of the crew was thinking the same thing, but none wanted to voice it aloud. In their experience, only two types of civilizations broadcast openly into space without fear: the incredibly primitive and the absolutely terrifying. Navigation Officer Thexmar, a methodical cronite with 4 legs and a shell-like carapace, finally spoke up from his station. "Commander, our long-range scanners are detecting artificial structures on the planet's surface. Cities with populations in the millions. But the construction materials don't match any known architectural standards. They appear to be building with processed stone, refined metals, and, sir, some of their structures are made from organic compounds that our databases can't identify." Weapons Officer Grunthar, a hulking member of the same species as the commander, leaned forward in his harness. His scarred face bore the marks of dozens of ground campaigns across the galaxy. "Commander, requesting permission to charge the main batteries. If this really is Earth, if humans really exist, we need to be ready for anything." Zix Thor considered the request carefully. The legends spoke of humans as being so dangerous that they had never been successfully conquered, despite being technologically inferior to most spacefaring species. According to the stories, they possessed something that no other known species had: the ability to become more dangerous when threatened, rather than seeking to flee or surrender. Negative, Weapons Officer. We maintain stealth protocols until we know more about what we're dealing with. Science Officer Kreltana cleared her throat nervously. Sir, there's more. Our biological scanners have identified the dominant species on the planet. They're bipedal, averaging 1.7 meters in height, with only 2 arms and limited natural weaponry. They appear to be omnivores, with relatively fragile bone structures compared to galactic norms. A ripple of nervous laughter went through the bridge crew. The description sounded almost pathetically weak compared to the mighty Vorthak or any of the other warrior species they had encountered. But Zyxthor wasn't laughing. He had studied the ancient archives, the classified documents that only fleet commanders were allowed to access. He knew that appearances could be deceiving when it came to Earth's inhabitants. Officer Kreltana, run a detailed analysis of their population centers. Look for military installations, weapons manufacturing, defensive structures. If these are truly humans, they will not be as helpless as they appear. As Kreltana worked at her station, the ship's artificial intelligence began processing the incoming data streams from the planet below. The AI, a sophisticated system called Nexus, had been programmed with information about thousands of civilizations across the galaxy. Suddenly, its mechanical voice filled the bridge with an announcement that made everyone's blood freeze. Warning. Warning. Planet designation matches archived parameters for Earth, Sol system, human territory. Recommend immediate withdrawal to minimum safe distance of 50 astronomical units. Human civilization detected. Attachment standard. Threat level, extinction class. The bridge erupted into chaos as crew members began speaking over each other in panicked tones. Several junior officers actually stepped away from their stations, as if distance from their instruments might somehow protect them from what they were learning. Zyxthor slammed one massive fist onto his command console. the sound reverberating through the bridge like a thunderclap. "Silence!" When quiet returned, he addressed his crew with the steady voice of a commander who had led them through countless battles. "I know what you're all thinking. The legends about Earth, about humans, they're stories told to frighten new recruits. Myths created by defeated enemies to explain their failures." He paused, looking each of his senior officers in the eye. "But myths don't generate electromagnetic readings this complex. Legends don't build cities that stretch across continents. And fairy tales don't develop technology that's actively broadcasting into space." Communications Officer Bill Nax raised one of his forearms tentatively. "Commander, what are your orders? Do we proceed with the invasion as planned, or do we report back to High Command for further instructions?" Zixthor stood slowly from his throne. The decision he made in the next few moments would determine not only the fate of his fleet, but potentially the future of the Vorthak Empire itself. "I want to know exactly what kind of civilization we're dealing with before we commit to any course of action. Officer Kreltana, I want detailed scans of their military capabilities, population distribution, and technological level. Bill Nax, monitor their communications. Look for any indication that they're aware of our presence." He turned to face the main viewing screen, where the blue-green planet hung like a jewel against the starfield. "If this really is Earth, if humans really exist, then we're looking at the most dangerous species in the known galaxy. They've never been conquered because they're unlike anything we've ever encountered. They don't follow the same rules as the rest of us." Navigation Officer Thexmar's shell rattled with nervousness. "What rules, Commander?" Zixthor's mandibles spread in what might have been a smile, if smiles could carry undertones of pure dread. "The rules of survival, officer. Every species in the galaxy, when faced with a superior force, either flees or submits. It's basic evolutionary logic. Self-preservation is the strongest instinct in any living being." He paused, letting his words sink in. "But humans, according to the archives, they don't follow that logic. When faced with impossible odds, when confronted by superior technology or overwhelming force, they don't run. They don't surrender. They get angry. And when humans get angry," he trailed off, staring at the planet below. "What happens when they get angry, sir?" whispered Communications Officer Bill Nax. Zixthor turned back to his crew, his expression grim. "When humans get angry, they start thinking creatively. And a creative human, according to every report I've ever read, is the most dangerous force in the universe." As if summoned by his words, Science Officer Kreltana's station began chiming with urgent alerts. Her face had gone pale as she read the incoming data. "Commander, you need to see this immediately. Our deep scan has detected something unusual about their population centers." "Define unusual," Zixthor commanded, though he was beginning to suspect he really didn't want to know. Kreltana's voice was barely audible. "Sir, every single one of their major cities is built around what appears to be a massive crater, not from natural geological activity, but from impacts. Very large impacts." And based on the electromagnetic residue and structural analysis, she looked up at him with wide, terrified eyes. "Commander, I think they've been bombing themselves. Repeatedly, with weapons that could level entire continents." The bridge fell into absolute silence as the implications of this discovery sank in. A species that possessed weapons capable of destroying planets and used them on their own world. Either these humans were completely insane, or they were so confident in their abilities that they considered planetary-scale destruction to be an acceptable form of conflict resolution. Weapons Officer Grunthor's scarred face had gone ashen. "Commander, if they're willing to use planet-killing weapons on themselves, what would they be willing to use on us?" Before Zixthor could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Navigation Officer Thexmar's multiple eyes were focused on his instruments with intense concentration. "Commander, we have a problem. I'm detecting multiple objects launching from the planet's surface. They're accelerating at rates that should be impossible for chemical propulsion, and they're heading directly toward our position." Zixthor felt a cold certainty settling in his chest. After decades of conquest across the galaxy, he was finally facing something that might be beyond his ability to control. How long until they reach us? At their current acceleration rate, approximately 6 of their planetary rotations. The commander closed his eyes and tried to process what he was hearing. In less than a week, he would discover whether the legends about humans were true, whether his mighty fleet of conquest ships was about to encounter the galaxy's most feared predators. And deep in his heart, Zixthor was beginning to suspect that the answer was going to be far worse than anything he had imagined. 6 days had passed since the initial detection of the approaching human vessels, and the atmosphere aboard the Infinite Conquest had shifted from nervous anticipation to barely controlled panic. Commander Zixthor maintained his composure on the bridge, but privately he was beginning to understand why every advanced civilization in the galaxy maintained strict protocols about avoiding the Sol system. Science Officer Kreltana had not left her station in 3 days, surviving on stimulants and determination as she analyzed the incoming data about the human ships. Her findings had shattered every assumption the Vorthak Empire held about technological development and military strategy. "Commander, the human vessels are unlike anything in our databases," she reported, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. "They're not using conventional propulsion at all. Instead, they appear to be manipulating local space-time to achieve velocities that should require exotic matter we assumed was purely theoretical." Zixthor leaned forward in his command throne. "Explain in terms I can understand, officer." "Sir, they're flying ships that bend the laws of physics as we know them. But here's the truly disturbing part. The energy signatures suggest these aren't military vessels at all. Based on their construction and emission patterns, I believe we're looking at their equivalent of exploration ships, possibly even civilian vessels. The implications hit the bridge crew like a physical blow. If civilian human ships possessed technology that exceeded Vorthak military standards, what did their actual warships look like? Communications Officer Bilmak suddenly straightened at his station, his compound eyes reflecting the glow of incoming transmissions. "Commander, we're receiving a communication from the lead human vessel. It's being broadcast on multiple frequencies simultaneously, including some that our equipment shouldn't be able to detect." "Audio only? Or are there visual components?" Zixthor asked, though part of him wasn't sure he wanted to see what humans actually looked like. "Both, sir. The transmission is incredibly sophisticated. They are somehow encoding 3-dimensional holographic data, along with the audio, and the signal strength is far more powerful than our own communications array." Zixthor felt his secondary hearts beginning to race. "Can they break through our stealth systems?" "Sir, I think they already have. The transmission is being directed specifically at our ship's location." "They know exactly where we are." The commander's claws automatically extended from his fingertips, a reflexive response to danger that had served him well in countless battles. But this situation was unlike anything he had encountered before. Usually, when stealth failed, it meant immediate combat. The fact that the humans were bothering to communicate instead of simply attacking was somehow more frightening than an immediate assault would have been. "Put it through," he commanded, trying to keep his voice steady. The main viewing screen flickered to life, and for the first time in galactic history, a Vorthak crew found themselves looking directly at a living human being. The creature on the screen was exactly as their scans had indicated: bipedal, roughly 1.7 meters tall, with only 2 arms and what appeared to be laughably fragile bone structure. Its skin was a pale pinkish color, and instead of proper scales or chitin, it was covered in some kind of fabric material. Most disturbing of all, it appeared to be completely unarmed, without even basic defensive modifications. But there was something about its eyes that made Zixthor's evolutionary instincts scream warnings. The human was looking directly at him through the screen, with an expression of calm curiosity that suggested it felt no fear whatsoever about confronting a fleet of alien warships. When the human spoke, its voice was transmitted with perfect clarity despite the vast distance between them. The ship's universal translator, one of the most sophisticated systems in the galaxy, struggled for several seconds before providing a translation. Greetings, unknown vessels. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth science vessel Curiosity. We've detected your ships in our outer system and wanted to extend a welcome. We're not sure what brought you to our little corner of space, but we're always excited to meet new civilizations. Would you like to come aboard for a cultural exchange? The bridge of the infinite conquest fell into complete silence. Captain Chen's casual tone suggested she was inviting them for a social gathering rather than addressing a potentially hostile alien invasion force. The disconnect between the situation and her reaction was so extreme that several crew members began to wonder if the universal translator was malfunctioning. Navigation Officer Thexmar was the first to find his voice. "Commander, their lead ship has moved to within 10,000 kilometers of our position. How did they close the distance so quickly?" Zixthor checked his tactical displays and felt his blood temperature plummet. The human ship had indeed appeared practically on top of them, without triggering any of their proximity alarms. Either their sensors had completely failed, or human technology was so advanced that it made Vorthak systems look like primitive toys. On the screen, Captain Chen was still smiling with that unsettling expression of friendly curiosity. "I know this might be overwhelming," she continued. "First contact situations can be pretty intense. But we've been looking forward to meeting our galactic neighbors for decades. We have so many questions about your cultures, your worlds, your technologies. I hope you'll be patient with us. We're still pretty new to all this." Weapons Officer Grunthar leaned over to Zixthor and whispered urgently, "Commander, I'm reading massive energy signatures from their ship. Whatever they're using for power, it's outputting more energy than our entire fleet combined." Zixthor activated the communication system, unsure of what he was going to say, but knowing that silence was no longer an option. "This is Commander Zixthor of the Vorthak Imperial Fleet. We are conducting a routine patrol of this sector. Your approach was unexpected." Captain Chen's smile grew even wider, which somehow made her look even more dangerous. "Oh, I'm sure it was. We're still getting used to interstellar travel ourselves. It wasn't that long ago that we thought we were alone in the universe. Finding out about galactic civilization has been like Christmas morning for our entire species." Science Officer Kreltana frantically worked at her station, trying to analyze the human ship that had appeared so suddenly. Her readings were producing results that challenged everything she thought she knew about physics and engineering. "Commander," she whispered urgently, "their ship appears to be constructed from materials that shouldn't exist. The hull is showing properties of both organic and metallic compounds, but arranged in patterns that create structural integrity thousands of times stronger than our best armor. And the energy distribution throughout their ship, it's as if the entire vessel is alive." On screen, Captain Chen was consulting what appeared to be a primitive datapad. "I hope you don't mind, but we've been scanning your ships while we talked. Your technology is fascinating. We haven't seen designs like yours before. The way you've arranged your weapon systems is particularly interesting. Very efficient for large-scale orbital bombardment." Zixthor felt a chill that went beyond physical cold. The human was casually discussing their ship's military capabilities, as if she were commenting on the weather. Either she was completely naive about the implications of her words, or she was sending a very subtle threat. "You seem remarkably calm for someone encountering an alien fleet," Zixthor observed carefully. "Well, we've been preparing for this possibility for a while now," Chen replied. "Once we developed faster-than-light travel, we figured it was only a matter of time before we ran into other spacefaring civilizations. We're actually excited about the opportunities for trade, cultural exchange, scientific collaboration. There's so much we can learn from each other." Communications Officer Bilnax's hands were trembling as he processed the subspace data streaming from the human ship. "Commander, they're transmitting massive amounts of information about their civilization directly to our computers. Technical specifications, cultural databases, scientific journals. It's like they're giving us their entire technological and social foundation." The obvious question hung in the air. What kind of species would freely share their most sensitive information with potentially hostile aliens they had just met? The answer that occurred to Zixthor was deeply troubling. A species so confident in their abilities that they didn't consider any other civilization to be a threat. Captain Chen, Zixthor said slowly, are you not concerned about security protocols? In our experience, first contact situations require careful precautions. Chen laughed, a sound that somehow conveyed both warmth and something that made the commander's survival instincts twitch with unease. Oh, we've taken precautions. The ship you're talking to is just one of 12 that responded to your arrival. The others are hanging back a bit. We didn't want to seem aggressive by surrounding you. Zixthor's tactical display suddenly lit up with new contacts as his sensors finally detected the additional human ships. They had been sitting motionless in space, completely invisible to Vorthak detection systems, positioned in a perfect sphere around his fleet. If the humans had wanted to attack, they could have destroyed every Vorthak ship before anyone realized they were there. The realization that his entire fleet had been helplessly surrounded without his knowledge sent a wave of primitive terror through Zixthor's nervous system. In 3 decades of military service, he had never felt so completely outmaneuvered. As I was saying, Chen continued cheerfully, we're really looking forward to getting to know you better. We've prepared welcome gifts, samples of Earth culture, art, music, literature, and we have thousands of questions about your homeworld, your society, your history. This is going to be so much fun. Science Officer Kreltana looked up from her instruments with an expression of pure confusion. Commander, I'm analyzing the data they've transmitted about their world. According to this information, humans are there. She paused, struggling to find words. They're what, officer? Sir, they're prey animals. Their eyes are positioned for depth perception rather than wide-angle threat detection. They have no natural weapons, minimal body armor, slow reflexes compared to galactic norms. By every evolutionary metric, they should be herbivorous herd animals, living in constant fear of predators. Weapons Officer Grunther studied the tactical readings with growing unease. But their ships suggest a completely different story. I'm reading weapon systems that could level planets, defensive capabilities that would laugh off our most powerful weapons, and propulsion technology that treats physics like a polite suggestion. On the screen, Captain Chen was still speaking with that unsettling combination of friendliness and absolute confidence. We've also prepared some demonstrations of human culture for you. I think you'll find our approach to problem solving pretty interesting. For example, we'd love to show you some of our historical documentaries about how we've handled various challenges over the centuries. Something in her tone when she said challenges made Zixthor suspect that human definitions of problems and solutions might be very different from galactic norms. What kind of challenges? He asked, though every instinct warned him that he didn't want to know the answer. Oh, you know the usual stuff. Global wars, planetary disasters, extinction-level events. Nothing we couldn't handle with a little creativity and cooperation. Humans are pretty good at adapting to difficult situations. Zixthor's mind raced as he tried to process what he was hearing. A species that casually referred to planet-wide wars and extinction events as usual stuff was operating by completely different parameters than anything in his experience. Captain Chen, if I may ask, what is humanity's current population? Just over 8 billion, she replied without hesitation. Why do you ask? The number hit the bridge crew like a physical blow. 8 billion individuals of a species that treated planetary warfare as routine problem-solving. The Vorthak Empire's entire military consisted of fewer than 50 million warriors across hundreds of worlds. Navigation Officer Texmar's shell was rattling with nervous energy. Commander, they've transmitted coordinates for what they call a cultural exchange station in their outer system. They're inviting our entire fleet to dock there for what they term a welcome celebration. Zixthor stared at the tactical display showing the 12 human ships that had effortlessly surrounded his fleet. Each one was broadcasting power signatures that exceeded his flagship's capabilities, and according to Captain Chen, these were just exploration vessels. For the first time in his military career, Commander Zixthor was beginning to understand the difference between confidence and arrogance. His fleet had been arrogant. These humans who treated first contact with potentially hostile aliens as an opportunity for a party, they were confident. And that confidence was the most terrifying thing he had ever encountered. Against every military protocol he had ever learned, Commander Zixthor found himself leading his fleet toward the coordinates provided by the humans. The Cultural Exchange Station turned out to be a structure so massive that his navigation systems initially mistook it for a small moon. As they approached, the true scale of human engineering became apparent, and with it, a growing understanding of just how outclassed the Vorthak Empire truly was. The station stretched for hundreds of kilometers in every direction, its surface covered with docking bays that could accommodate ships larger than anything in the known galaxy. Streams of vessels moved in perfectly coordinated traffic patterns around the structure, not just the sleek exploration ships they had first encountered, but massive cargo haulers, elegant passenger liners, and things that defied easy classification. Science Officer Kraltana had not slept since the humans had made contact, her entire worldview crumbling with each new piece of data. Commander, this single station contains more refined metal than our homeworld's total industrial output over the past century. The power requirements alone should require the energy output of a star, but I can't detect any external power source. "What are you saying, officer?" Zixthor asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Sir, I believe they've learned to extract energy directly from space-time itself. They're not just violating the laws of physics as we understand them. They've rewritten those laws entirely." As their fleet approached the designated docking area, Communications Officer Bilnax began receiving information that challenged his understanding of logistics and organization. "Commander, the humans have assigned individual docking supervisors to each of our ships. They've somehow identified our specific vessel classes, crew complements, and even estimated our dietary requirements. They're preparing what they call appropriate accommodations for our visit." Navigation Officer Thexmar's multiple eyes were focused on his instruments with intense concentration. "Sir, the docking procedures they've transmitted are more sophisticated than anything we use at our primary military bases. They're treating our warships like honored guests rather than potential threats." Weapons Officer Grunthar looked up from his tactical display with an expression of barely controlled fear. "Commander, I've been analyzing the defensive capabilities of this station. I don't think it has any." "Explain." "There are no weapons systems, no shields, no armor plating. From a military perspective, this structure is completely defenseless." Either the humans are incredibly naive, or he trailed off, unwilling to voice the alternative, or they're so confident in their abilities that they don't see the need for defenses. Zixthor finished grimly. As the Infinite Conquest settled into its assigned docking bay, the crew could see human workers moving around the station with casual efficiency. The beings looked exactly as fragile as their scans had indicated, small bipedal creatures with no natural armor or weapons, wearing simple clothing and moving with the relaxed posture of individuals who had never known fear. Captain Chen's voice came through the communication system with the same warm enthusiasm she had displayed during their first contact. "Welcome to Harmony Station. We're so excited to have you here. We've prepared tours, cultural exchanges, and what we like to call getting to know you activities. I think you're going to love seeing what humanity has accomplished since we joined the galactic community." The docking process completed with a precision that put Vorthak engineering to shame. Mechanical systems interfaced seamlessly with alien technology. Atmospheric pressures equalized automatically. And what the humans called universal accommodation protocols provided suitable environments for every species in Zixthor's fleet. As the airlock cycled open, Zixthor found himself face-to-face with Captain Chen in person for the first time. She was even smaller than she had appeared on the viewing screen, barely reaching the middle of his torso even when he was in a relaxed posture. Her lack of natural defenses was almost comical. Soft skin, small teeth, fingernails that couldn't cut through paper. Everything about her physical form suggested a species that had evolved in complete safety, without predators or natural threats. But her eyes held the same unsettling confidence he had noticed during their first communication. She looked at his 3-meter frame, his razor-sharp claws, and his armor-plated hide with the casual interest of someone examining a mildly interesting artifact. "Commander Zixthor, it's so wonderful to meet you in person," Chen said, extending her hand in what the universal translator identified as a friendship gesture. "I hope the docking process wasn't too complicated. We're still working out the bugs in our universal compatibility systems." Zixthor stared at the offered hand, unsure how to respond. In Vorthak culture, extending an unprotected limb toward a potential enemy was either a sign of complete submission or evidence of mental deficiency, but Chen's relaxed posture suggested neither. Carefully, he reached out with one massive claw and gently touched her tiny hand. The contrast was so extreme that he could have crushed every bone in her arm without effort, yet she showed no signs of concern about the danger. "Captain Chen, I must admit your openness is unexpected. In our experience, first contact situations are typically more cautious." Chen laughed, the sound somehow conveying both genuine amusement and something deeper that Zixthor couldn't identify. "Oh, we were cautious. We spent 3 days analyzing your ships, your technology, your cultural broadcasts before making contact. We just have different definitions of careful, I suppose." She gestured for them to follow her into the station. "Come on, let me show you around. I think you'll find our approach to space habitation pretty interesting." As they walked through corridors that seemed to stretch infinitely in all directions, Zixthor began to notice details that defied his understanding of space station construction. The walls appeared to be made from some kind of living material that responded to their presence, adjusting lighting and atmospheric conditions automatically. Gardens of alien plants lined the walkways, creating ecosystems that shouldn't be able to survive in artificial environments. "Captain Chen, how long has humanity been involved in space travel?" he asked, trying to understand how such a seemingly primitive species had developed such advanced capabilities. "Oh, we've been puttering around our local system for about a century now," she replied casually. "But serious interstellar travel is pretty recent. Maybe 15 years since we figured out faster-than-light physics." Science Officer Kreltana, who had been silent since leaving their ship, suddenly spoke up. "Teddy, 15 years? Captain, our species required 3 centuries to develop basic FTL capabilities after achieving spaceflight." "Really? That's fascinating," Chen replied with genuine interest. "We'd love to study your developmental timeline. Comparative technological evolution is one of our favorite research areas." They entered a vast chamber that appeared to serve as a central hub for the station. The space was filled with thousands of humans engaged in activities that ranged from scientific research to what appeared to be recreational pursuits. Children ran between the adults, playing games that involved manipulating small devices that projected 3-dimensional images into the air. Weapons Officer Grunhar watched the children with growing unease. "Captain, are those juveniles operating holographic projection systems?" "Oh, those aren't holograms," Chen replied cheerfully. "The kids are playing with pocket-sized matter manipulators, basic reality editing tools. We give them to children around age 7 to help develop spatial reasoning skills." The casual mention of reality editing tools as children's toys sent a collective shudder through the Vorthak delegation. Technology that could manipulate matter at the atomic level was considered theoretical by most galactic civilizations. Yet humans were using it for recreational activities. As they walked deeper into the station, they passed areas that challenged every assumption about space habitation. Artificial gravity that could be adjusted in real time, environmental systems that created perfect replicas of alien atmospheres, and transportation methods that seemed to move people through solid walls without any visible mechanism. "Captain Chen," Zixthor said carefully, "I notice your station doesn't appear to have any military defenses. Are you not concerned about security?" Chen paused, turning to look at him with an expression that somehow conveyed both surprise and gentle amusement. Oh, we have defenses. They're just not the kind you'd recognize as weapons. What do you mean? Well, for example, every system on this station is backed up in 17 different dimensions simultaneously. If someone wanted to destroy Harmony Station, they'd have to figure out how to attack multiple realities at the same time. Most hostile species find that pretty challenging. She continued walking as if she hadn't just casually mentioned technology that existed purely in the realm of theoretical physics for every other known civilization. Then there's the temporal stabilization network. She added conversationally, if someone did manage a successful attack, we could simply revert the station to a previous temporal state. It's like having unlimited save points in a game. Navigation Officer Thexmar's shell was rattling with nervous energy. Captain, you're describing technology that should be impossible. Oh, it was impossible, Chen agreed cheerfully, right up until we figured out how to make it work. Humans are pretty good at turning impossible things into everyday conveniences. They entered what Chen described as an observation lounge, a transparent walled chamber that provided a panoramic view of the space around the station. Zixthor could see his fleet docked alongside the massive structure, and the comparison was humbling. His ships, which had seemed so powerful and imposing just days ago, looked like children's toys next to human engineering. But what captured his attention was the view beyond the station. Space was filled with human vessels. Not just ships, but structures that defied classification. Some appeared to be mobile cities. Others looked like artificial planets under construction, and a few seemed to exist in constant states of transformation, their shapes flowing like liquid metal. Captain Chen, exactly how large is human civilization? Zixthor asked, though he was beginning to suspect the answer would be disturbing. Well, let's see, she said, consulting a device that materialized in her hand from nowhere. We have about 12,000 star systems under development, maybe 300 billion space habitats, and our population is approaching 40 trillion individuals. Still pretty small compared to what we're planning for the next century. The numbers were incomprehensible. The entire Vorthek Empire controlled fewer than 50 star systems and had a population measured in the low billions. Humanity wasn't just more advanced, they operated on a completely different scale of existence. Communications Officer Bill Nax had been quietly monitoring human data streams since their arrival, and his expression was one of complete bewilderment. Commander, they're sharing their entire technological database with us. Manufacturing techniques, scientific discoveries, cultural archives. There are no restrictions, no security protocols. It's as if they have no concept of proprietary information. Chen overheard the comment and smiled. Why would we keep secrets? The universe is big enough for everyone to prosper. Besides, watching other species figure out our technology is one of our favorite forms of entertainment. Something in her tone made Zixthor look at her more carefully. Entertainment? Oh, yes. We have an entire genre of media devoted to filming alien reactions to human technology. Galactic Neighbors Discover Impossible Physics is one of our most popular show formats. The expressions you're all making right now would definitely go viral on the human data networks. The realization that his crew's terror and confusion was being treated as amusing content for human entertainment was somehow more unsettling than any display of military might could have been. It suggested a level of casual superiority that went beyond mere technological advancement. Science Officer Kreltana had been analyzing atmospheric readings since their arrival, and her latest discovery added another layer of impossibility to their situation. Commander, the air composition on this station is being customized for each individual present. Somehow, they're maintaining thousands of different atmospheric conditions simultaneously in the same shared space. That's our adaptive environmental system, Chen explained proudly. Everyone breathes what they need, regardless of their species requirements. We figured out selective reality manipulation a few years ago. It's really handy for multicultural gatherings like this. Zixthor closed his eyes and tried to process what he was experiencing. selective reality manipulation. Technology that could edit the fundamental properties of existence on demand. Children playing with matter manipulators. Defensive systems that operated across multiple dimensions. A civilization that treated physics as a set of suggestions rather than immutable laws. When he opened his eyes, Captain Chen was watching him with that same expression of friendly curiosity that had characterized all her interactions. "I know this is a lot to take in," she said gently. "First contact with human civilization can be pretty overwhelming. But don't worry, we've prepared a whole orientation program to help you understand how things work around here. Think of it as Humans 101 for our new galactic friends." The phrase "new galactic friends" hung in the air like a promise and a threat. Because Zixthor was beginning to understand that in the context of human civilization, friendship might be the only option available to the rest of the galaxy. The Humans 101 Inches orientation program turned out to be far more comprehensive than Commander Zixthor had anticipated. Captain Chen led the Vorthak delegation through a series of chambers that served as both museum and demonstration space, each one revealing another layer of human capability that challenged galactic understanding of what was possible. Their first stop was what Chen cheerfully called the History Hall, a vast space filled with interactive displays that chronicled human development from their earliest days to their current status as what appeared to be the galaxy's most advanced civilization. But it was the way the history was presented that began to explain the fundamental difference between humans and every other species the Vorthak had encountered. "This section covers our early period," Chen explained, gesturing to a display that showed primitive humans living in what appeared to be caves. "As you can see, we started as fairly typical prey animals. No natural weapons, minimal physical defenses, slower than most predators on our world." Science Officer Kreltana studied the display with fascination. "How did your species survive? Based on these biological parameters, you should have been extinct within a few generations." Chen's smile took on that unsettling quality that Zixthor was beginning to recognize as uniquely human. "We learned to cheat." The display shifted to show early humans crafting tools from stone and wood. But these weren't simple implements. Even their primitive weapons showed design principles that suggested an intuitive understanding of physics that most species took millennia to develop. When we couldn't outrun predators, we made them come to us on our terms. When we couldn't overpower larger animals, we figured out how to turn their own strength against them. When we couldn't survive harsh environments, we changed the environments instead of adapting to them. Weapons Officer Grunthar examined a recreation of an early human spear thrower. This leverage system would multiply force output by a factor of 6. Your ancestors were developing force multiplication technology before they had metallurgy? "Oh, that's nothing," Chen replied casually. "Wait until you see what we did once we figured out fire." The next section of the display showed human civilization's rapid development through agriculture, metallurgy, and early engineering. But what struck the Vorthak delegation was the timeline. Humans had progressed from stone tools to spaceflight in less than 12,000 years. Most galactic species required hundreds of thousands of years to achieve similar advancement. The key difference, Chen explained as they moved through displays showing human wars, disasters, and technological breakthroughs, is that most species develop technology to make life easier. We develop technology to solve problems that should have killed us. She gestured to a section showing what appeared to be a massive explosion. This is from our nuclear age. Most species discover atomic energy and use it for power generation. We discovered it during a global war and immediately figured out how to make weapons that could destroy entire continents. Communications Officer Bilmax studied the display with growing horror. "Your species weaponized atomic energy before learning to harness it safely?" "Well, yes," Chen said matter-of-factly. "We were in the middle of a war at the time, and we needed something that could end conflicts quickly. The power generation applications came later, after we'd figured out how to not accidentally blow up our own cities." Navigation Officer Thexmar's shell rattled nervously. "How many of your own cities did you destroy before perfecting the technology?" Only two, Chen replied with the casual tone most species reserve for discussing minor inconveniences. And they weren't really accidents. We did it on purpose to convince our enemies to surrender. Worked pretty well, actually. The revelation that humans had deliberately destroyed their own population centers as a negotiating tactic sent a chill through the Vorthak delegation that went beyond physical cold. It suggested a species that viewed mass destruction as an acceptable problem-solving tool. But the displays continued to reveal escalating examples of human unconventional thinking. They saw evidence of humans launching themselves into space using controlled explosions, exploring the deepest ocean trenches in pressure vessels that operated beyond safe engineering margins, and conducting scientific experiments that risked global catastrophe for the sake of advancing knowledge. This section covers our space age, Chen said, leading them to displays showing human expansion beyond Earth. Once we figured out how to leave our planet, we started looking for new problems to solve. The first images showed humans establishing bases in environments that should have been instantly lethal. The surface of their moon, the crushing depths of gas giant atmospheres, the radiation-soaked regions near their star. Instead of avoiding these deadly environments, humans seemed to seek them out as challenges to overcome. Why would you choose to live in such hostile conditions? Science Officer Kreltana asked. Your species could have developed perfectly safe orbital habitats. We did develop those too, Chen replied, but safe habitats don't teach you anything new. We learned more about engineering, biology, and physics in our first decade of space exploration than we had in the previous century of ground-based research. She gestured to a display showing what appeared to be humans deliberately flying into the corona of their star. This mission taught us how to manipulate plasma on a stellar scale, completely changed our understanding of energy generation. Weapons Officer Gruntar stared at the image with disbelief. Your people flew into a star for research purposes? Well, we built special ships for it, Chen clarified, as if that made the feat reasonable. It was only dangerous until we figured out how to create localized space-time barriers. After that, stellar exploration became routine. The casual mention of space-time manipulation as a routine technology was becoming a recurring theme in human explanations. They spoke of bending the fundamental forces of the universe the way other species discussed basic tool use. As they progressed through the displays, the timeline showed human development accelerating at rates that defied understanding. Technologies that should have taken centuries to develop were being mastered in decades or years. Problems that had stymied galactic civilization for millennia were being solved as side projects by human researchers. This brings us to our current era, Chen said, leading them to a section that showed human space colonies spread across thousands of star systems. Once we developed faster-than-light travel, we started meeting our galactic neighbors. The displays showed human first contact with various alien civilizations, and the pattern was always the same. Initial fear from the aliens, followed by amazement, then what appeared to be enthusiastic cooperation. How do other species typically react to meeting humans? Zyxthor asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Oh, pretty much the way you're reacting now, Chen said with amusement. Shock, disbelief, existential terror, then gradual acceptance that the universe is much weirder than they thought. Most species adapt pretty well once they realize we're not actually trying to conquer or destroy anything. Communications Officer Bilnax had been monitoring human data streams throughout their tour, and his latest discovery added another disturbing piece to the puzzle. Captain Chen, I've been analyzing your information networks. It appears that your entire civilization operates without central authority or unified command structure. That's right, Chen confirmed. We tried centralized government for a while, but it kept leading to wars and oppression. So we developed distributed decision-making systems that allow billions of independent groups to coordinate without anyone actually being in charge. The concept of a civilization that functioned without hierarchical control was so alien to Vorthak thinking that several crew members simply stared at Chen in confusion. But who makes decisions about resource allocation? Military strategy? Technological development? Zyxthor asked. Everyone, Chen replied simply. Any human who wants to work on a project can find others with similar interests and start collaborating. If the project is useful, it attracts more participants. If it's not, it gets abandoned. We found that voluntary cooperation produces better results than forced coordination. Science Officer Kreltana was studying a display showing human research facilities. "Captain, these images show thousands of different scientific projects being conducted simultaneously. How do you prevent duplication of effort?" "We don't," Chen said cheerfully. "Duplication is a feature, not a bug. If 10 different groups are working on the same problem, we get 10 different solutions to choose from." Jested. "Competition breeds innovation." She gestured to a section showing what appeared to be humans engaged in recreational activities that involved manipulating fundamental forces. For example, we have several million humans who practice physics surfing, using gravity waves for entertainment. Their hobby research led to breakthroughs in space-time manipulation that revolutionized our transportation systems. The idea that reality-altering technology had been developed as a side effect of recreational activities was somehow more disturbing than if humans had developed it for military purposes. It suggested that their casual relationship with impossible physics extended to every aspect of their civilization. Their tour concluded in what Chen called the Future Projects section, where displays showed human plans for the coming centuries. The scope of their ambitions was staggering. They intended to terraform entire galaxies, create artificial universes, and solve what they called the boredom problem by finding new forms of existence to explore. "The boredom problem?" Navigation Officer Thexmar asked weakly. "Well, once you've mastered physics, engineering, biology, and dimensional travel, you start running out of interesting challenges," Chen explained. "So we're working on expanding the definition of reality itself, creating new rules for existence to explore." She gestured to a display showing what appeared to be humans constructing something that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "This project involves building structures that exist outside normal space-time. We're hoping to discover what lies beyond the universe itself." Weapons Officer Grunthar had been silent for most of the tour, but finally found his voice. "Captain Chen, I must ask, is there anything that humans consider impossible?" Chen paused, seeming to give the question serious consideration. "Not really," she said finally. "We've learned that impossible usually just means we haven't figured out how to do it yet. Everything seems impossible until someone does it for the first time." She turned to address the entire Vorthak delegation with that same warm, unsettling smile. "That's really what we wanted to share with you today. The universe is full of possibilities that most species never explore because they assume certain things can't be done. Humans exist to prove that assumption wrong." As they stood in the chamber surrounded by displays of human achievement, Commander Zixthor finally understood what made humans so uniquely dangerous. They weren't just technologically advanced, they had fundamentally different definitions of what was possible. Where other species saw limitations, humans saw challenges. Where others saw danger, humans saw opportunities for learning. Perhaps most terrifyingly, they approached the impossible with the casual confidence of children playing games, completely unaware that they were rewriting the rules of existence itself. The orientation program was over, but Zixthor had a growing suspicion that the real education was just beginning. 3 months had passed since Commander Zixthor's first encounter with humanity, and the changes to his understanding of the galaxy had been so fundamental that he sometimes felt like a different being entirely. What had begun as a routine conquest mission had evolved into something unprecedented in Vorthak history, a complete restructuring of their empire's place in the cosmic order. The meeting room aboard Harmony Station was filled with representatives from dozens of species, all of whom had arrived for what humans cheerfully called the Galactic Neighbors Welcome Conference. The casual name belied the significance of the gathering. This was the largest interspecies diplomatic event in recorded history, and it had been organized by humans as if they were planning a neighborhood barbecue. Commander Zixthor sat at a table that had been specifically designed to accommodate his species' physiology. along with similarly customized seating for beings ranging from gas-form entities to crystalline hive minds. The humans had somehow created furniture that existed in multiple dimensional states simultaneously, allowing each species to interact while remaining in their optimal environmental conditions. Captain Chen stood at the center of the gathering, addressing the assembled representatives with the same warm enthusiasm she had shown during their first contact. But now Zixthor understood that her casual confidence wasn't naivety. It was the natural bearing of someone whose species had transcended the limitations that constrained everyone else. "Welcome everyone to what we hope will be the first of many gatherings like this," Chen announced. "We know that meeting humans for the first time can be a bit overwhelming, so we've prepared what we call an integration support program to help everyone adjust to the new galactic situation." Science Officer Kreltana, who had remained aboard Harmony Station as a liaison for the Vorthak Empire, had spent the past months studying human civilization. Her reports had been so extraordinary that High Command initially suspected she had suffered some kind of psychological breakdown. The reality of human capabilities was simply too far beyond galactic norms to be easily accepted. "The first item on our agenda," Chen continued, "is addressing some of the concerns that have been raised about human expansion into galactic space. We understand that our approach to problem-solving can seem a bit intense to species that prefer more traditional methods." A representative from the cautious Melkorian collective raised one of its 12 arms tentatively. "Captain Chen, our scientists have calculated that human population growth and territorial expansion rates will result in your species controlling the entire galaxy within 2 centuries. Are there any plans to moderate this expansion?" Chen laughed, the sound somehow managing to be both reassuring and utterly terrifying. "Oh, goodness, no! 2 centuries? That seems really slow. We're hoping to finish mapping and developing the galaxy much sooner than that." She gestured to a holographic display that materialized in the center of the room, showing a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy with human territories marked in blue. The blue areas were spreading across star systems like an accelerating infection, but rather than consuming resources, each new territory seemed to be generating even more development and growth. "But here's the thing," Chen continued. "Human expansion isn't about conquest or control. We're not trying to take anything away from anyone else. We're expanding the total amount of available everything." Communications Officer Bill Nax, who had also remained as a Vorthak observer, spoke up from his position near the data relay stations. "Captain, could you explain what you mean by expanding the total amount of everything? For example, take this star system we're currently in. Before humans arrived, it contained 1 star, 8 planets, and various asteroids and comets. Standard galactic thinking says that's a fixed amount of resources that have to be shared or fought over." The holographic display zoomed in on their current location, showing the Sol system in incredible detail. "But we don't accept limitations like that. So we've added 17 artificial planets, 42 orbital habitats, 3 additional stars we moved from nearby systems, and about 6,000 space stations of various sizes." She gestured casually at the display as if she were describing a home improvement project. "We also opened up pocket dimensions for additional living space, created matter conversion systems that turn empty space into useful materials, and established temporal loops that let us have more time to work on projects." The assembled representatives sat in stunned silence as they tried to process the implications of what they had just heard. Humans hadn't just colonized their star system. They had completely re-engineered it, adding stellar bodies like a homeowner might add rooms to a house. Navigation Officer Thexmar had been studying human territorial development patterns, and his analysis had produced results that challenged everything he thought he knew about resource management and population growth. "Captain Chen, our projections suggest that human expansion actually increases the available resources for everyone in the galaxy. How is this possible?" "Well, that's the beauty of thinking beyond traditional limitations," Chen explained. "Most species see the galaxy as a fixed container with finite resources. But what if you could make the container bigger, What if you could turn useless matter into useful materials? What if you could create energy from nothing but empty space? She walked over to a wall that appeared to be made of solid metal and pressed her palm against it. The metal immediately transformed into a transparent material that revealed vast chambers beyond filled with impossible machinery that seemed to exist in constant states of transformation. Everything you see here was built from the vacuum of space using our matter converters. We've learned to extract materials from quantum fluctuations, create energy from dimensional barriers, and manipulate time so that we can accomplish centuries of work in standard years. A representative from the ancient Zarthol Empire, beings who had existed for millions of years and considered themselves the elder statesmen of galactic civilization, finally found the courage to speak. Humans, we must ask, what are your ultimate intentions? What do you want from the galaxy? Chen paused, appearing to consider the question seriously. You know, that's a really good question. Most species we've met seem to want things like territory, resources, power, security, but humans, she trailed off, looking thoughtful. The honest answer is that we want to see what happens next. We want to discover new problems to solve, new impossibilities to make possible, new forms of existence to explore. The galaxy is just the starting point. She gestured to another section of the holographic display, which showed human exploration vessels heading toward other galaxies at velocities that exceeded light speed by factors that approached theoretical infinities. We've already sent expeditions to the Andromeda Galaxy, the Magellanic Clouds, and a few others. Early reports suggest that each galaxy has its own unique physics, which means brand new categories of impossible things to figure out. Science officer Kreltana had been analyzing human data streams constantly, and her latest discovery had implications that went beyond astronomy or technology. Captain, I've been studying your species' biological development since joining galactic civilization. You're evolving rapidly. Oh, yes, Chen agreed cheerfully. Meeting new species always teaches us things about ourselves. We've picked up telepathic abilities from the mind-linked Valkyrie, dimensional sight from the phase-shifting Greltoth, and time perception from the temporally distributed Caxmini. The casual admission that humans were somehow acquiring the unique evolutionary traits of other species sent another wave of unease through the assembled representatives. Evolution was supposed to take millions of years, not happen through casual interaction. How is such rapid biological adaptation possible? The Zarthol representative asked. Well, once you understand how genetics, consciousness, and reality interact, it's not that difficult to make adjustments, Chen explained as if she were discussing minor software updates. We view biological limitations the same way we view physics. Interesting challenges to overcome rather than permanent restrictions. Weapons Officer Gruntar, who had initially been terrified by human military capabilities, his findings had been simultaneously reassuring and deeply disturbing. Captain Chen, our analysis suggests that humanity has not engaged in any military conflicts since achieving interstellar travel. How do you resolve disputes with other civilizations? Chen's expression became thoughtful. We don't really have disputes anymore. It's hard to argue about resources when you can create unlimited amounts of anything. It's difficult to fight over territory when you can create new dimensions to live in. Most conflicts happen when someone feels threatened or limited, and we've learned to eliminate those conditions. She gestured to the assembled representatives. For example, every species in this room was initially concerned about human expansion affecting their civilizations. But as you can see from the development reports, every system where humans have established a presence has experienced massive increases in available resources, technological capabilities, and living standards for all inhabitants. It was true. The data was irrefutable. Human expansion had resulted in improvements for every civilization they encountered, not through conquest or subjugation, but through what they called collaborative impossibility development. The Melkorian representative raised another arm. But surely there must be some conflicts, some species that refuse to cooperate or accept human assistance. Oh, absolutely, Chen replied. We've encountered several species that prefer isolation or have fundamental philosophical objections to our approach. We respect their choices completely. She manipulated the holographic display to show star systems marked in different colors. See these red areas? Those are civilizations that have asked us to stay away, so we do. We've established protective barriers around their territories to ensure our expansion doesn't accidentally affect them. Communications Officer Bill Nax studied the display with growing amazement. Captain, you've quarantined entire regions of space to protect species that want nothing to do with you? Of course, Chen said, seeming genuinely surprised by the question. Consent is really important to us. We're not trying to force anyone to participate in galactic development. We just make sure the option is available for species that are interested. The concept of a dominant civilization that actively protected the rights of weaker species to refuse assistance was so unprecedented that several representatives simply stared at the display in confusion. Commander Zixthor had been mostly silent during the conference, absorbing information and trying to understand the implications for the Vorthak Empire. Finally, he spoke up. Captain Chen, what you're describing sounds almost like stewardship, as if humanity sees itself as responsible for the welfare of the galaxy. Chen's expression became serious for the first time since he had known her. That's a really thoughtful observation, Commander. I think you're right. In a way, once you develop certain capabilities, certain levels of understanding, you start to feel responsible for using them wisely. She looked around at the assembled representatives. Humans learned a long time ago that with great power comes the obligation to use it in ways that benefit everyone, not just ourselves. We could easily dominate the galaxy through force, but what would be the point? It's much more interesting to help everyone achieve their full potential. The meeting continued for several more hours, covering topics that ranged from trade agreements to joint research projects to something humans called reality optimization protocols. But as the conference concluded, Zixthor realized that everything that had happened was really just a formality. Humanity hadn't conquered the galaxy. They hadn't needed to. They had simply made themselves so indispensable, so beneficial to encounter, that cooperation with them was the only rational choice for any civilization that wanted to thrive. As the representatives began to depart, Captain Chen approached Zixthor with that familiar warm smile. Commander, I wanted to thank you personally for being so open to this whole experience. First contact situations can be really challenging, but you've handled everything with remarkable grace. Zixthor looked at this small, seemingly fragile being who represented a species that had casually rewritten the rules of existence. Captain, I must ask, do humans ever feel fear? Chen's expression became thoughtful. Oh yes, absolutely, we're terrified constantly. Of what? Mostly of becoming stagnant, of running out of new things to discover, of reaching a point where there are no more impossible things to make possible. She gestured toward the vast expanse of space visible through the station's transparent walls. The universe is so full of amazing mysteries, and we're afraid that someday we might solve all of them and have nothing left to explore. As Zixthor prepared to return to his ship and report back to High Command, he realized that he finally understood what made humans so uniquely terrifying. They weren't afraid of the unknown. They were afraid of a universe without unknowns to discover. And given their track record for turning impossibilities into everyday realities, that fear might be perfectly justified. The galaxy would never be the same. But as Zixthor looked around at the representatives from dozens of species, all of whom were already making plans to collaborate with humanity on projects that would have been inconceivable just months ago, he realized that different didn't necessarily mean worse. In fact, it might mean infinitely better. The age of human stewardship had begun, and the universe itself had become humanity's next impossible challenge to solve. Hold on, this planet, it's Earth? Run for your lives! Alarmed alien, Sci-Fi.